Okay, sorry for the delay, everybody, and welcome to another in a series of Represents breakfast briefings on what you need to know about what's going on in the state legislature and all the things that you generally don't hear about. You know, if you turn your news on, if you're watching MSNBC or CNN, you're hearing a lot about national news, and it's very depressing. But if you want to get more depressed, you should read about what the state legislature is doing and not doing to support you, and that's why we're doing these breakfast briefings. But I don't mean them to depress you. I mean them to show you that there's a lot that we can do to make a real difference, and that'll happen with your votes in November. We are going to have Elicia Gonzales, who's the executive director of the Women's Medical Fund, which is an organization that provides funding for abortions in the state. They also do a lot of lobbying and legislative work, and she'll talk about that. We have Elizabeth Fiedler on with us, and she was a former reporter on WHYY Public Radio, and she also has been in the state legislature. Represent was a proud supporter of her in her primary in 2018, and in her district, the primary was really the race. And she defeated a lot, not the incumbent had dropped out, but she defeated several Republican or Democrats who were part of the machine, and she's providing a fresh voice for her district in South Philadelphia. One of the reasons we want to talk about abortion today is it's not everybody's favorite topic and point of, on top of their heads, but it's a big deal in Pennsylvania and in the country. And it's a big deal for women who are facing difficult choices in their lives. And the sad thing is that many of these decisions about women's reproductive health, and that includes all the issues related to birth control and other reproductive organ health, is that so many of the decisions are made by men. And they're made by men who don't have to face the most difficult decisions in their lives. June Medical Services was a recent Supreme Court case. There were 6 separate opinions written. There's 9 Supreme Court justices. All 6 opinions were written by male justices. The 3 women did not write opinions. It's shocking. 82% of Pennsylvania counties have no abortion providers, and Medicaid doesn't cover abortion. Public funding for abortions only available in the cases of life endangerment, rape, and incest. All of these things are unacceptable. So how does Represent accomplish its goals? So far we've talked about policing in Pennsylvania, we've talked about fracking, we've talked about a number of issues that affect lives in Pennsylvania. And all things where we see that there's a need to change who our elected officials are and flip both houses of both legislative chambers. How does we do it? We evaluate all the Democratic women running for the Pennsylvania legislature based on their progressive values. And on the issue of abortion, we really push to make sure that everybody's 100% pro-choice, pro-women's choices. We determine the flippability of a district, we raise money, and we invest in good, winnable races. We've invested in all the key races that are identified as flippable by the HDCC, which shows that we're working on the powerful races and the feasible races. But I'm most proud of the fact that we influenced who's running in many of these primaries. For example, the 2 women who were heavily supported by the SDCC in Pennsylvania, who were both recently on the Obama list, Julie Slomsky and Janet Diaz. Both women had primaries. Both women have told other people and have told us and posted on their Facebook sites that they would not have won their primaries without Represent support. And so we can be really proud that we helped to support good, strong candidates in the primary who are now getting national recognition for their ability to hopefully flip their districts. Our previously endorsed candidates are running very strong races. As I mentioned, 2 of the candidates Represent endorsed for Senate are on the Obama list, and 2 additional women that we supported, and I saw that Amanda Capoletti's on the call. She will take over in a race. She's running in a district that's largely Democratic, and we help to support her, so that is not a Democratic flip, but it certainly is good to have a woman, and looking forward to having a woman in that seat. Most of our House incumbents have used their early money to secure their positions, to be able to talk about the viability of their races. Some of them have used the money that we've given in their early campaigns to flip from being a top tier, from an emerging race, which is one that people are watching, to being top tier. And our money has really helped that process. And we have the problem is in Pennsylvania right now, there's so many good candidates that a lot of the traditional funders are having trouble picking where to go. So we're helping to support coordinated campaigns at all levels, but more money is needed. Our next steps, we have applications from 50 candidates. We've pulled polls, both public and private evaluations. Our endorsements will be announced in early September. We expect to disperse over about $175,000 this round, which will take us to, I think the number will take us to like 425 or something like that for the cycle. That's as opposed to 200 that we did last cycle, but more money is clearly needed. And I just want to remind everybody on the call, if you're not at the endorsement level, you're too late to evaluate candidates, but you're not too late to join what we think will be, I think it's going to be August 30th. We're going to have our conversation with everybody who qualifies at the endorsement level. And you can listen in on the process and be part of the discussion of how we allocate that next $175,000. And it really gives you more of an inside track as to how we feel about a lot of the candidates. Unfortunately, for the candidates who are on the call, you're not allowed to call into that, but we'll give you the results shortly thereafter. We're trying to focus on major issues in the state. We're focusing on down ballot races as well as Washington, and we're encouraging our volunteers to join campaigns and help turn PA blue. Elicia Gonzales, as I mentioned, is the executive director of the Women's Medical Fund. It was started in '85 when the Pennsylvania legislature voted to take Medicaid funding away from people applying for abortion. They provide financial support to about 3,200 women each year with an average of just $131. But more importantly to me is they provide community organizing. The Hyde Amendment, as some of you have heard of, the Hyde Amendment Henry Hyde was a US congressman, and he proposed something that went into law that says that no federal funding shall be used for abortion. And so when congressional candidates are asked how they feel about the Hyde Amendment, this is what the discussion is. So what happens to poor women? I've often said that, you know, women I know who have daughters their daughters could get abortions. They can find a doctor, then they have the money. But this is women who cannot afford, for whom a $130 bill or $200 bill is more than they can afford. They don't have access to abortions. And that's what happens, and that's the purpose of the Women's Medical Fund. But this also exploits economic inequality in our state. We've been trying to take a special lens look at all of the issues that we talk about. And we're talking about them not just in terms of racial equity, but we're also talking about economic equity. And this one has but it happens to have a disproportionate impact on women of color. Who's calling the Women's Medical Fund? Everybody who calls are living in poverty. They live on less than $8,200 a year. 73% are parenting 1 to 2 other children at home. 82% are Black and Latino. And 62% were enrolled in Medicaid. So as I mentioned, as I said, this is an economic and a racial equity issue in the state. And we're not meeting the need. There isn't enough money at the Women's Medical Fund, and there isn't enough money across the state to help support these women. And they often do not know where to go or how to provide funding for this necessary service. Interesting, Pennsylvania is considered to be, this is one of our glory moments, the birthplace of the anti-choice movement. Health plans only allow abortion in the case of endangerment, life endangerment, or rape and incest, unless the individual can purchase abortion coverage at an additional cost. Parental consent is required for women under 17. And as we said earlier, 85% of our counties lack abortion providers and abortion clinics, making travel an additional burden on these women. And when they're facing this very difficult choice, the last thing you need is more problems. There's been a movement around real alternatives. And you know what real alternatives are? It's sending women for counseling after they've already, most often after they've really made the difficult choice that they want to terminate a pregnancy. Now they're sent to be counseled by people who want to talk about other choices. And this is being provided, these services are being provided by your tax dollars. So instead of your tax dollars going to the support of women in the choices they've already made, it's going to counseling and things that make them feel bad about those choices. They lie, and they also lie about, at this counseling that is paid for by your state dollars, they lie about, I love some of these statistics. You know, the abortion causes breast cancer in 5% of women. Abortions led to a significant increase in murder rates. And women who obtain abortions are more prone to abuse their future children. All lies, and all lies that are propagated with your tax dollars. So we need some alternate ways of looking at this. There's a real push to overturn Roe and a real push to change the laws to make, you know, and our Supreme Court has shown that they're very willing to, although not officially overturn Roe, use every other weapon at their disposal to do it. If they ever did overturn Roe, though, states that have specifically have legalized abortion would not be affected. Pennsylvania, of course, is not one of those states, and abortion would become instantly illegal in Pennsylvania. By the way, you can join the Women's Medical Fund and go to their website and give them money to find out more of what's going on and to really understand this issue. I'd like to introduce Elizabeth Fiedler right now. Elizabeth is, as I mentioned earlier, we were very proud at Represent to support her in her primary in 2018, enabling her to win her primary and then go on and win this seat. She's a very progressive voice in the legislature and a strong leader in the regional coalition. And we're very proud to have her as a Represent member in the legislature. And what I'd like her to talk about is, so how is abortion framed in the legislature? Why aren't you passing laws that can enable women to control their own health? And will it be different in January?
Thank you, Christine, and thank you to Represent certainly for the support. It means a lot to me. And hello to everyone and good morning. In first response to Christine's question, will it be different in January? When we flip the legislature and we walk in with a majority, the answer is absolutely yes. So I know you all are very committed to making that happen, to ensuring not just that we have strong candidates, some of whom I see on here, Amanda, Tara, I know there's more, I was scrolling. Good morning to everybody. I look forward to seeing you all in Harrisburg as well. But not just recruiting people, but making sure that they have the support to get across the finish line in November. Really one of the most consequential elections of our lifetimes. It's hard to tell what's coming next, right? But absolutely incredibly important, especially when it comes to the State House and Senate, something that we think a lot about. And in Harrisburg, well, I know for a lot of us, it has been, I am serving in my first term. It is a true honor. I love the job. Being in Harrisburg does sometimes feel like a time warp. I did mention that once to a reporter. It's astonishing, and it's not funny at all, in fact. The way in which women and our rights and our bodies are treated really disrespectfully, are not given the full rights that other people, including men, receive and deserve and would expect, has been shocking to me. I came from a job as a reporter before this. I worked for the NPR station in Philadelphia for 11 years. And really going to Harrisburg and seeing both the behavior of people and also legislatively has been a bit of a shock and quite disturbing to a lot of us. When it comes to legislation, we see things that are aimed at restricting our rights as women on healthcare, on abortion. And then we also see sort of sneaky tricks. So it's not even done necessarily directly, but like when, for example, when the telemedicine bill, which as I understand it was a pretty pretty solid bill to expand telemedicine in Pennsylvania when we amend things like that to include restrictions on abortion, right? So it's not just cut and dry. We see a bill that's bad, but we also see good legislation or pretty good legislation that's amended to include these abortion restrictions and other restrictions on women's health. Really outrageous. We have there are a number of caucuses, Women's Health Caucus, the Women's Caucus, the Senate and the House, a bunch of people who have been pushing very, very hard for our Democratic leadership to take a firm stance on this. We recognize, I have been there for only 2 years, and the election that I came in on was with a lot of people helped get there. So I want to thank you for that. That has made my experience even more powerful to have so many allies there, including especially so many women. And we've been pushing within our own caucus to say this is absolutely, we have a firm position. Abortion is healthcare, and we should recognize it in that way in the caucus. We should hold hearings on why these bills are bad. We should, really pushing within our own caucus to do it too. So it's definitely, it's kind of a battle with the Republicans, who are obviously in control right now. They have the gavel. They get to decide what bills run, what even gets a hearing in committee before it would ever come to the floor. And really things have been totally held up in that way. So even good legislation that would expand our rights, or my colleague Liz Hambidge, who you all supported, she and I have a bill that is an informed consent bill, also having to do with women's health, that would, right now, if you go to get an exam in the state of Pennsylvania, or if you go for surgery and you go under anesthesia, while you're under anesthesia, a medical resident could perform a pelvic exam on you for their training purposes, not related to your health, for their training purposes.
Wait a minute. Could you repeat that one, please? Because I don't know if everybody knows that was legal. Can you, ladies, going in for some kind of surgery, taking your 20-year-old daughter in for surgery, and what were they allowed to do?
A pelvic exam, which, if anyone is familiar with that, it is a quite invasive exam in which a hand is, inserted into your body.
So your daughter could be going in for an appendectomy, and they figure, oh, while she's there, let's send in a few medical students to do a pelvic exam. Legal in Pennsylvania.
Legal in Pennsylvania until the legislation that Liz Hambidge and I have finally comes up for a vote and gets passed. Liz is, many of you know her, she is fierce. She is an amazing partner. We got very close to getting it up for a hearing in committee, and it didn't happen, but I can assure you that important legislation like that will protect our lives and our bodies and our bodily autonomy, we will do everything we can to get a hearing and get it passed once we have the majority. But even common sense, so-called common sense, that can't.
Why didn't you get a hearing?
I'm
feeding you lines. Let's talk about whether the Democrats and people who have common sense legislation can bring that legislation even to a hearing, because who controls the hearings? Sorry, I'm feeding your lines.
The Republican majority controls what comes up for hearing.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
So these are all important things to know. Thank you very much. I think it's really good. And sorry to pin you down on that, but it's really important for us to put these things in context. That I still hear from people saying, why can't we have bipartisan legislation? Why are we talking so strongly about women, about electing the progressive women Democrats?
Christine, could I just add that we actually have we have a significant number of Republican co-sponsors of our bill. So it is also bipartisan. We just can't get the folks in charge, the structure, the leadership to allow it to come for a vote. But I think your point is an important one as well. Absolutely.
Thank you very much for clarifying that. And that's a January 1 when you take the House.
Yep. And a lot of other pieces of legislation as well. Absolutely. We're ready.
That's why it's the common question on many of these calls. Amanda Capoletti, I know that you're on, and Amanda's running for the state Senate, but she's also worked heavily with Planned Parenthood. Would you like to chime in?
Hi, Chris. Yeah, everything that Liz said is so important to know when we're talking about anything that has to do with reproductive health, that mostly we're just not getting the right people into office to get these things done. When we find little things that could be little wins, like Liz and Liz's bill, when I was working at Planned Parenthood, we did a lot to try and push and support that, because we want to make those small wins to build up to the big wins, so that on January 1, when we take over in hopefully both legislatures, that we're ready and set to go to really enshrine into our legislation and into Pennsylvania reproductive health and everybody's right to access reproductive health, to keep legislators out of doctors' offices by scripting them on what they can say, but allowing us to continue to protect the bodily autonomy of people, and that protecting consent to procedures. I did not know about the pelvic exams that were happening until I was with Planned Parenthood, and it was horrifying to find out and to work with Planned Parenthood to bring that to light and to really support Liz. And I'm excited to try and do that, from the Senate side of things. And I'm happy to talk about any kind of legislative bills that are out there when it comes to reproductive health and what we're seeing, Liz and Liz do, but then what we see are overwhelmingly conservative leadership. And I think that's really important, as Liz said, is to note it's the leadership in Harrisburg that's preventing it. There are things that we can get done with bipartisan support, but it's the leadership that doesn't move anything when we have it.
Thank you very much. Sorry to put you on the spot like that, but we knew you were an expert on it, so thanks for chiming in.
No problem.
One of the things that Elizabeth Fiedler just said that and Amanda echoed that I want to make sure you all heard is, abortion's healthcare. Abortion is part of the reproductive choices that women have. Abortion is no one's first choice of what to do next with their bodies. No woman says, oh, I don't know what to do this month, let's have an abortion. It is a very difficult choice for women, but it's got to be within the list of things that women can explore if they're having a difficult pregnancy, if they're not, if this is not the right choice for them right now, them or their family, if it's affecting their health, it's affecting their life. And the fact that in most counties in Pennsylvania, an overwhelming number, it's not an easy choice for women to make. And they're made to feel like criminals for making this decision. Not the right choice. So let's go on and see, and let's meet with some of our other candidates who are on the call today. Jill Denon, I know you said you had to go off at some point because you have another endorsement call coming up. Is this part of your platform? And is this something, is abortion as healthcare something you can talk about within your campaign, or is it just one of those subtle background issues?
For my particular legislative district, I think it's kind of a subtle background issue. Unfortunately, in my legislative district, when I've been knocking on doors the past 3 weekends and I say, what is the most important issue to you? Everybody says property taxes. So that's kind of the overarching issue in my district. I come from a very, very mixed district. And I'm, fortunately or unfortunately, in one part of the district that is very conservative, there is a very, very large, pro-life movement. And I think that, what I keep telling people is that, we have to be pro-choice, and we have to have a voice in Harrisburg and bring that voice to Harrisburg. And if we don't have the majority, much like what Amanda and Liz were saying, that you can't run bills. So you have to have a seat at the table first to get these things done. And I think that when I'm talking to women in particular about the abortion issue, and I'm Catholic and I am a practicing Catholic, I am well aware of what the Catholic Church thinks about abortion. But when I talk to my Catholic friends, we all agree. Every single person agrees that that women should be able to have access to abortion, and being pro-choice does not mean that it's abortion on demand. And I think we have to frame it that it's a healthcare issue, just like you said, it is a healthcare issue. So it is an issue that comes up in my campaign, because my opponent and her primary opponent, that's all they posted was about, you know, killing babies and all this. And I think that we need to change the narrative. And I think that the talking point that it's a healthcare issue is where we need to go with this, because we're never going to get anywhere, you know, with the what I call the crazy pro-lifers. Like you said, they're lying about the statistics, they're lying about the facts. We do not have abortion on demand in Pennsylvania. Roe v. Wade doesn't say at 9 months you decide you don't want to have a baby, you can have an abortion. And that's what these pro-life people are putting out there. And people are low information. So I think it's up to us to get to Harrisburg and not only, you know, create a new narrative for this, but to put in the reasonable laws that are going to protect the most vulnerable women when it comes to healthcare. And I totally agree. If we don't have the majority and get a seat at the table, that's where we're going to be.
Thank you.
That's kind of how I frame it in my district, because there is a very large conservative, you know, pro-life. So you don't want to completely alienate them, but I also understand that I need to have that seat at the table.
Thank you, Jill. And Jill, what district are you hoping to represent? Where is it located?
It's the 147th, which I know numbers don't mean anything, but it's basically where Amanda went to high school, which is Boyertown, which is northwestern Montgomery County, and it goes all the way, it crosses the whole entire county all the way down to Lower and Upper Salford.
Thank you. And the important thing for people here to know is that part of the goal of Represent is that you're going to vote, and you may individually all be voting for the right person. I vote in Philadelphia. I will always be represented by a Democrat. It's just the way my district works. But just voting and just worrying about Philadelphia does not get these laws changed. And that's why one of the things Represent does is we take a full state look at this. We're looking at candidates from throughout Pennsylvania so that we can pick which ones are going to be aligned with our progressive values, and we can support them. So last cycle, for example, we supported Elizabeth Fiedler in Philadelphia, but we supported Sarah Innamorato in Allegheny County. Both needed to be elected in order to start to have an impact on what goes on in our legislature. We support you, Jill, so far in your race. We're supporting Amanda Capoletti in her primary with the idea that those are good seats, and in the collar counties around Philadelphia, there was a greater chance of flipping seats, and we're heading that way. But we can't avoid thinking about Janet Diaz's Senate seat, the seat she's running for in Lancaster County, because we want Janet Diaz sitting next to Amanda Capoletti in the state Senate. And that's why we have to take a full state look at this.
And I have to hop off, but can I just make one more comment? One of the very disturbing things is that in these open seats, like I'm running in, they're running very, very conservative right-wing people. So the urgency is there even more, because they're going to be replaced with people who are going to fight to take our rights away. And so I think there's even more of an urgency for people who are running in these open races, because my representative is retiring, and the one who is running is there. It's scary. So I just want to say that I have to hop off. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, Represent. You've been a huge support.
Thank you, Jill. I understand, Elicia Gonzales, you joined us and we had the time wrong. So I'm happy that you've been able to join us. I went through your slides, probably not as well as you would have, Elicia, but we're happy to have you. Got a question for you from one of our people, and that's it. Want to know, how do you coordinate with Planned Parenthood, and is there any coordination? And if you would just talk about what your lobbying efforts are like.
Sure. Apologies again profusely for having the time wrong, but appreciate you all making space for me to share some words with you all today. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, just fine.
Great. So I would say that we have historically partnered with a lot of reproductive rights and health organizations, including Planned Parenthood, the ACLU of Pennsylvania, Women's Law Project, just to name a few. And I would say that our relationship with Planned Parenthood exists both as direct providers of ours. We give them a direct pot of money to directly fund folks who are unable to cover their costs of the abortion. And then we also are strategizing with Planned Parenthood, specifically right now, about how to get the word out about what you all saw on the slides regarding real alternatives. There's an effort kind of across the country, but there's an effort within the city and then the state of Pennsylvania to just draw attention to the fact that it's such an egregious group of people who get so much money. And there's the tricky part about it, and what we're trying to do with Planned Parenthood is to figure out which angle to take, because there's a bazillion different ways to look at this issue. One is that the organization Real Alternatives is funding people to give out fake information. Two is that they continue to get a ton of our taxpayer dollars, including a lot of money directly from TANF, which is designed to go specifically for folks who are poor people. It's basically welfare. So they're literally taking money out of the hands of poor people to possibly provide some sort of care. The other part of it that's confusing, and this is why it gets so nuanced, is that they can't account for all of their money. And so we don't actually even know what services they're providing. We think that it's more like a laundering kind of scheme where they're taking money from our state dollars and then funneling out to Indiana and Michigan in particular. Well, not Michigan, because luckily they had a governor there who just stopped that contract. So like I said, it's just a very nuanced issue. And so we're working with Planned Parenthood. We want to do a community town hall, a virtual, obviously, community town hall coming up probably in late September. So I'll be sure to send that information out to all of you, because it's such a big and nuanced issue. But at the end of the day, the message is simple, which is that we want the governor to cut the contract with Real Alternatives. As you saw from the slides, they just got another, I think I put it in the slide, they just got another like $3.7 million grant to last them through November, and then they'll for sure get continued when the new budget comes in, the full budget. So we're just asking the governor, and would love for all of you all to put pressure on the governor particularly, because he has the ability to do it, like with the, with one fell swoop of his pen, if you will, to cut that contract. But then, because we don't unfortunately know the lay of the land, for the government chair coming up in the years to come, we also need it to be a legislative action. And so that's where some of our efforts will come in, where we would love support from across the state to be able to really put pressure on legislators, many of whom don't know the ins and outs of the nuance of that Real Alternatives. And the way that it was described to me by Senator Vincent Hughes, who I love, who's a supporter of reproductive health and rights, as you know, kind of chalked it off and just said, well, it was a gentleman's handshake. It was an agreement made, and so it's just talk about making like this little, feminist blood boil. But yeah, so I would say, in terms of some of our work, and then I'll stop talking so folks can ask questions, but Women's Medical Fund, for the past, I would say 3 to 4 years, we've been really trying to approach our work from a community grassroots organizing perspective. We in no way, shape, or form feel like we need to kind of muddy the waters, if you will, of the lobbying efforts by some of the bigger fish, if you will. So we certainly lift up and support and highlight the work of, let's say, like Planned Parenthood. But we are more focused on building power in our communities, primarily with folks, ultimately with folks who are impacted by the abortion restrictions.
Thank you, Elicia.
Yeah.
Very important. And I want to echo a couple things that she said. One of the things people have asked, besides giving money to represent PA, what can we do about the issues we care about? And I want to make sure, first of all, we mention besides giving money to represent PA, because we're investing in these fabulous candidates to make change in Pennsylvania, but also as we're all sitting home more and during the pandemic, and I'm guessing it's going to get worse as the weather gets worse. Elicia mentioned a really critical thing we should all be doing, and that's we should all be lobbying. Okay, I'll follow up on what Pat had said, and which is that it's our time to lobby our legislators and our government. It's our time we're pointing up a lot of issues here that need to be addressed. Issues like we need to why is the governor signing this contract or allowing his people to sign it? What's in the contract, and should we be having our auditor general out auditing to see what's in it? Is there a provision in this legislation, in this contract, that allows them to send money to outside of Pennsylvania? And why is Pennsylvania's state money going to other states? Isn't that a question we would want the auditor to look into? Aren't these questions we would want in new legislation? And the only way the only way change happens is if we lobby our legislators and our government and let them know what we care about. Is that Pat?
Yeah, hi, thank you. I think we've not talked about this as a role for represent investors, but I think we have a huge potential here as soon as the legislature gets session to be able to have a communication with our legislators and learn from them what the pressure points are and the action points are. And as Elicia said, we need to be speaking out and using our connections with the legislator to the most effective way we can now. And lobbying is going to be huge. And this is such a big issue, millions of dollars, and we should be trying to squelch it, just like it needs us to do. So it's something we need to think about after November.
Well, and before November, because we're still sitting around and, in addition to writing checks, in addition to going to Turn PA Blue and volunteering to help these candidates with postcarding and with telephone calls, it's another thing you can do, from home. By the way, if you haven't called Pat Toomey lately, it's always a good time calling his office and letting him know how you feel about a lot of issues. But these are important things for us to be dealing with.
So it would be really helpful if we could hear from people on this call want to do this. Thank you.
Thank you. Meg Pritchard had a question, and she said there's a lot of media reporting lately about how younger women don't think about abortion, and they don't think about reproductive choices, and they don't think about they just assume that the health care that they want is going to be available to them. Is Women's Medical Fund reaching out to young people to make sure they understand what the issues are here?
Yeah, sure. I mean, and I think, the media that was out was pointing up a really big discrepancy that has existed for some time regarding the fact that a lot of folks, speaking about language and the importance of language, there's been a lot of pushback, as I'm sure folks have recognized, that when folks talk about being pro-choice, it doesn't really represent the full spectrum of folks who need to access care, because for some folks, it's not a matter of choice. It's a matter of, they have 3 kids and they already can't take care of those kids because they don't have enough money, or, their jobs are really insecure, or their housing is unstable. We're continuing to do, but learning from our feedback surveys that we get from folks who call the helpline, that housing instability is a far greater issue than we thought. It's actually twice as bad as we thought it was, as is folks are reporting at twice the rate that we thought that having an abortion allowed them to leave their abuser. And so, when folks are making it seem as though abortion is like the only issue, I think that it loses sight of the fact that folks are still unable to have a family of their choosing. They're still unable to raise their family in an environment that's free from harm, i.e. police brutality is a huge issue right now. And so I feel like I related somewhat to the article in the sense that we can't separate out abortion from other issues. And I think that was the crux of really what the articles were really referencing. I think that it does somewhat miss the point, because we find that a lot of folks who are younger are engaged with our work. I don't think I put it in the slides because it got too layered, but we have what's called the Philadelphia Reproductive Freedom Collective. And that's really where a lot of our grassroots organizing kind of lives. Yeah. Those are all younger folks, and seemingly continuing to get younger, or I'm getting older, I'm not sure. But those are folks who are learning grassroots organizing techniques, power mapping, communication, research, security. They're going out there, they're canvassing in the communities, asking folks like what folks feel about abortion. We're about to embark on we were about to embark on it before the pandemic, but a study specifically looking at what Latinos' attitudes are about abortion access. And then also talking specifically, we have a campaign out right now talking about self-managed abortion care, which is also seeming to be somewhat of a hot topic right now. Folks have all different kinds of opinions about it, but that's all led by younger folks. And we are hoping to have folks even younger get involved. We're part of a coalition that's trying to pass comprehensive sex ed at the state level, which probably isn't going to go anywhere anytime soon. But that's consisting of a group that has a lot of younger folks. So I see young folks involved in our work
and I
a lot.
think one of the things Elicia is really pointing out to us, and this is heading to you, Elizabeth Fiedler, and our candidates, is that this is part of a progressive agenda. You know, we've been talking on these calls and on our breakfast briefings, we've talked about policing, we've talked about fracking, we've talked about a lot of things. Up and coming, we're going to have one on gun sense, we're going to talk about LGBTQ rights, we're going to talk about housing insecurity. All of these things, they're not separate issues. We talk about them because they're all part of this grand progressive agenda to make Pennsylvania, not progressive, people-focused agenda, to make Pennsylvania a better place to work. No young people just decide, hey, my cause in high school is abortion. It isn't anything you think about until you actually need the services. But it's part of the overall making sure that our government works for our people. We have a couple more candidates on the line, and I want to mention to Elicia, we're going to get out information about this, about the real contract to all of everybody who's on this call, and we'll put it out there just because we want to make sure people know it's a good thing to call about. You're looking for a reason to call a legislator this week. Tara Shakespeare, you've been active in this issue. Welcome to the call. Can you give us the 2 minutes on how abortion looks from your potential district in Cumberland County?
For sure. So actually one of the reasons I'm running is because of the fetal remains bill from 2019. I'm a woman who has suffered or dealt with recurrent miscarriages, which is really hard to talk about. But here I am everywhere doing this. And as a result, one of those pregnancies wasn't viable and I opted for an abortion. And so that was back in 2014. So when I found out my state legislator and now my opponent has continually voted in favor of limiting abortion access for women like me, for women like people on this call, for everyone, I decided, okay, no, we can't have this. The fetal remains bill, trying to put the limiting abortion access into the telemedicine bill. These are just a couple of the things that, even though my opponent is a woman, she is continuing to do. And so that has been one of the stories that I tell people about why I'm running, because I can't imagine that our state legislators are continually making decisions that hurt regular people. And so in telling my story, I have heard from people from all walks of life. I have heard from doctors in Pennsylvania. I have heard from nurses. I have heard from people who have chosen abortion. I have heard from people who didn't choose abortion and had some regrets about it. I'm lucky that I get to live in an area where abortion access is an option for me, but I know for a lot of Pennsylvanians, it's not. And so we need to have the conversation about healthcare, and we need to have a face on abortion. So whether it's my face or someone else's face, because this is a human issue where we cannot have forced motherhood. It's repressive, and we don't have to live like this. So we have to get not just women elected, but we have to get progressive women elected. And so I am really excited to have these conversations, even though it's perpetually uncomfortable. I think it's so valuable, and it's my voice right now is being used to comfort hundreds of other people. Thank you.
And again, what she's saying is that abortion shouldn't be, it's the reason we chose to do it as a topic this week. It shouldn't be uncomfortable. It's a woman's health care alternative. And should be part of the whole list of things that we should have available to us should you be in the awful position that somebody like Tara was in. And it shouldn't be hard for us to talk about. The other candidate we have on the call today is Lindsay Drew. Is this something you can talk about in your district?
Hi, good morning. Thank you. We haven't really tested the conversation too much. I think that it's something that I've had numerous conversations on a personal level with folks, in the district. But something that we're really just focusing on is comprehensive health care in general. And I think when we continue, like Tara said, when we continue to have the conversation that women's rights are healthcare, that, and reproductive healthcare is healthcare, that we can start to normalize that conversation and it becomes less of a taboo thing. And what frustrates me so often is that people automatically go to the, quote unquote, controversial conversation of abortion and forget all of the other really important components that come to it. So long answer to that, is that no, we haven't really tested the message. But I know for me as a candidate, it's something that I'm just completely unapologetic about. I walk around now and protest with the bands off my body water bottle from Planned Parenthood because that's the way that I can tell everyone, or I have a hat that says Planned Parenthood makes America great. Because that, to me, that's, kind of the way that I can respond, because people are just really uninformed is what I find most often. And so when we can have conversations about the options and issues and where it comes to choice, and this right now in the climate that we're living in with people wanting a choice of whether or not they wear masks to keep us safe, has been a really great entry into the conversation about whether or not women should have a choice with their body and being forced to do something that they don't want to do, and that will completely alter the path and quality of their life in many ways. And so I actually appreciate that welcome door because we can, talk about it, but I don't go too far into it, just in day-to-day campaigning, because I know that how polarizing it can be. But I know that for me, once I'm in Harrisburg and elected as state legislator, I can then, go full pro-choice, scream it from the rooftops and protect women for our future generations and ourselves.
Thank you.
Can I just say one quick thing, only because I feel like I would be forever regretful if I didn't bring this up on this particular Zoom. The other thing that we are embarking on at Women's Medical Fund is the idea, the truth, that not just folks who identify as women get abortions or need reproductive health care. And so we're trying to think specifically about what it would mean to change our name. It's not necessarily a topic that's met lightly, and folks have a lot of different opinions. And so I would love to be able to engage in conversation with folks who care deeply about this issue and it can help us think through how to bring people along. How do we make sure that nobody feels excluded in this process, because it's, folks who are on the margins of the margins of the margins are the ones that are getting hurt.
Thank you very much. And thanks for bringing that up, because it is, we're going to have to cut now. It's 9:30. I want to make sure everybody knows what our next breakfast briefings are. And one of them goes, and what you can do next. You're going to hear from us again and again. We're trying to raise enough money to support candidates like the ones you heard today. If you have friends you want to introduce us to, that's fabulous. But going to what Elicia just mentioned, on Friday, August 28th is our next breakfast briefing, and it's going to be talking about LGBTQ rights in Pennsylvania and what do they look like. And our speakers on that are going to be Ann Wakabayashi, who's the former head of Emerge Pennsylvania, who's a real activist in this area. And we're also bringing on Ciora Thomas, who's a Black trans woman activist in this area. And she'll be talking about some of the issues and some of the things that trans women go through. And this is one of those topics it's surprising how this is affecting the LGBTQ community in general. And on Friday, September 11th, we're going to be talking about gun violence in Pennsylvania. And Christian Soltisiak, who's the managing director of Ceasefire Pennsylvania, will be our speaker, as well as State Representative Donna Bullock. And if you've seen the number of what's going on in gun shootings and things in Pennsylvania, you know that we have to be paying attention to this. And our current legislature is not bringing up subjects related to this. And they're not working on the issue of how do we get guns out of schools and important topics. So those were our next couple. One of the ones we're working on for later this fall goes back to an issue that Elicia mentioned about housing and how insecure people are about housing. And it's only going to get worse as evictions are allowed to happen. And we're going to be talking about what rights people have, what kind of housing alternatives are available to people who are not affluent enough to be able to afford where they're living and afford safe housing. And we'll be talking about that later. Because again, this goes to, there's a raft of progressive issues and there's a raft of things we should be working on. But it's going to take gaining the majority in Harrisburg and giving Governor Wolf excellent legislation to go sign that's going to make Pennsylvania a better state for all of us. Follow Represent in your social media. Follow all of our electeds and our candidates in your social media because you get things to retweet, resend out. All of these things are good chores for you during the pandemic while you're sitting home. You know, go take a tutorial on how to be better at social media. There are all kinds online. And respond to all of these things with likes, shares, reposts, retweets. Go to turnpablue.org and go and volunteer for some of these candidates. I saw they just directed something where last weekend, I think it was, people made 42,000 phone calls for potential state representative Janet Diaz. We need you volunteering for all these candidates to make phone calls, send postcards. It's all stuff you can do. This is not going to happen just because. So thank you very much. Thanks to Elizabeth Fiedler. Thank you to Elicia Gonzales. Thank you to our other candidates who are on the call. We'll see you again on, as I said, on Friday, August 28th to talk about LGBTQ rights in Pennsylvania. Thank you.